In Quran, Islamic tradition, Islamic folklore, Muhammad is presented as the perfect man, the model that should be followed. As you have researched Islam, read the historical documents, even the hadiths, the early traditions, is Muhammad presented there as a model man throughout Islamic history?
No. I would say real Muslims, if they knew the things Muhammad did, they would not want him living next door to them. If you're
But this
looking,
is recorded in their own ancient
and
sources, you're saying.
their own sources, yeah. Well, one, you have lots of Muslims today who believe that Muhammad was sinless. That's false, even according to their own sources. Their own sources say Muhammad repeatedly sinned. He would have to ask for forgiveness of sins 70 times a day. So he clearly did things that we would regard as sin, but also that even in Islam were regarded as sin. But the things that he did that we would regard as problematic, or at least not something that the greatest man ever should do, right? Because, we can look at different cultures and say, okay, we understand it's a different culture, it's centuries ago, maybe we shouldn't hold that to our modern standard or something like that. With Muhammad being laid down, Surah 33, verse 21 of the Quran, as the pattern of conduct for Muslims, kind of hold him to a high standard here. But this is a guy who, if you're going down the list, he initially thought that his revelations were demonic in nature. He tried to commit suicide repeatedly for various issues. When he's getting these revelations and he thinks he's demon possessed, he's worried that people are going to make fun of him, so he tries to hurl himself off a cliff. Later on, he concludes that he's a prophet because his wife and her cousin convince him that no, you're not demon possessed. You're getting revelations from God. So he thinks he's getting revelations from God. Then the revelations stop, and he goes and tries to kill himself again. So this is a guy who runs to commit suicide whenever something goes wrong. Even according to Muslim sources, he committed the worst possible sin, the sin of shirk, when he received what are called the satanic verses. So this was the event when Muhammad really wanted his tribesmen who were still pagans to convert to Islam. He was hoping for a revelation that would convince them to do so, and he eventually got the revelation. He's receiving verses of the Quran, and then the story goes that Satan slipped some verses in there as he's receiving the revelations from the angel Gabriel. Satan slipped some extra verses in there, which caused Muhammad to tell his followers, as part of the Quran, that there are three pagan goddesses, Alat, Alusa, and Manat, that they can pray to. Those aren't the main God. There's still Allah who's over these pagan goddesses, but you can pray to the pagan goddesses because they will carry your prayers to Allah, and then Allah can answer them. Muhammad delivered these revelations to his followers as part of the Quran. He bowed down in honor of them. His followers bowed down, and the pagans bowed down too, because now they think, cool, Muhammad's on the same side with us. Then he comes back later and says, the devil made me do it. But notice, he still committed shirk. He still promoted polytheism. So you have things like that. Then you have, more things that today we would regard as moral issues. He had sex with a 9-year-old girl. The big scandal of his time, though, wasn't even that. It was that he married the wife of his own adopted son. So he had an adopted son named Zayd, and Zayd had a beautiful wife named Zainab. Muhammad goes over to see his adopted son one day, and his adopted son's not there, but Zainab is, and she's wearing almost nothing. And he starts praising Allah because he realizes Allah's going to give her to him. And so Zayd finds out about it, divorces him. And notice, this is one of the sins according to Islam. Not that, but Muhammad tells Zayd, when Zayd says, hey, I'm going to divorce her so you can have her. Muhammad says, no, keep your wife. Allah rebukes Muhammad for the sin of covering up what Allah was going to do, right? So Muhammad's sin was saying, no, don't divorce your wife so I can have her. Allah rebukes Muhammad, says, how dare you, you sinner, right? For
It's okay to have
it's fine to take the wife of your own adopted son, but just don't try to cover up what I'm about to do here. So that was his sin in that situation. And by the way, people still complain that Muhammad took the wife of his own adopted son. So the way he got around that was to abolish adoption. So there's no more adoption in Islam. You can take care of an orphan. There's no adoption where you actually adopt someone into the family. So in order to cover up what he did and make it so that it's not a problem, he had to do away with one of the most humane practices in history. So you can basically go down the line of how this guy treated his wives. He once got caught having sex with his slave girl, which wouldn't have been a problem. He was allowed to do that according to Islam. But he got caught having sex with his slave girl, Mary the Copt, in the bed of his wife Hafsa when she's out running errands. She comes back early, finds him in bed with his slave girl. She gets mad. All his wives start complaining. What are you doing having sex with a slave girl in our beds? And Muhammad swears an oath. He swears an oath. Fine, I will never have sex with her again. Then Allah gives him the revelations in Surah 66, verses 1 to 2, telling him, I didn't tell you to swear that oath. And he basically tells him to break it, tells him to break his oath and go back to having sex with his slave girl. He eventually got her pregnant. And so these are the kinds of things, right? He swears an oath and Allah tells him, I didn't tell you to do that. And then Muhammad is allowed to break his oath to his wife. So he can swear by Allah, I will never do this again. Oh, sorry, Allah told me to go ahead and do it. And so it's just, you can look at this and it's like, how is this the pattern of conduct for all human beings?
And you haven't mentioned slave trade. You haven't mentioned
that. Haven't mentioned slaughtering unbelievers in the name of Allah, killing apostates. Haven't gone through any torturing people. He tortured a guy for money. He knew a guy. They conquered an area, and there was a guy who knew where money was hidden, but he wouldn't tell. So Muhammad had his followers light a fire on the guy's chest to torture him into confessing where the money was. And
so in short, not quite the model man, huh?
I wouldn't want to live next door to him.